I'm devastated. I'm going to start crying right now. I don't even think I can talk about it. But then every week it got better. So whether it's
Wow.
only your own awkward, whether it's dealing with something else, 99.9% of the time, somebody else has gone through the same thing. So you're not alone. And what I offer is number one, to make sure that you just have support people around you that can help you to see that. And make sure that they're the kind of people that would lift you up like the rising tide, all boats. And then
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Own Your Awkward podcast. I am super excited today. We have got one of my newest friends who I just met as another local speaker here in the Northwest, David George Brooks, the gratitude guy. David, how are you today?
I am well, Andy. It's always great to meet new people. You and I connected and hit it off immediately. And I think we even talked a little bit about how on Zoom, it's so funny you meet people and most of them, it's pretty good, but you either really like the person or you think this is going to be not the most fun. But I just thought, oh, I love this Andy guy. How did I get lucky to meet him? So it's great to be here.
Definitely. And I just am so grateful for the community of people that I'm surrounded by. And there's been a couple times where there have been these surprise people that I have met locally. I'm in Tacoma, you're in Seattle, we're half an hour apart. And yet, Ruben down in Texas introduced
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And shout out to Ruben Schwartz with Memoron and his business for putting us together, because he's so good at having quality people in his circle
No,
too.
it's really neat. And I was talking to my son earlier about how we forget, of course, with Zoom, it's become so much part of our lives. But I'll think now, where are you? Oh, you're in Massachusetts. You're in Georgia. I got a couple of people in Great Britain, another friend in Australia. I mean, it's just amazing what this technology has done, because even though you and I are 30 miles apart, it feels like we're on Zoom. We're like having a cup of coffee and here we are at Starbucks. And it's such a neat technology.
Oh, it's great. We have to be able to take technology and use it, as best as we can. Be like, what, this will allow us to connect more, and then not have it replace the chance that we're still going to get together and connect in person pretty soon.
Exactly.
And have it enhance that and not replace it.
Exactly.
So, David, I like to ask my guests at the beginning, there's so much going on in the world and we're seeing all sorts of stuff out there. And I'd like to know kind of from where you sit and what you have going on. And I just think this is a perfect question for you as a gratitude guy. What's the most positive thing you see happening right now in the world?
Well, I think the term that I use around, I call it an attitude of gratitude and the gratitude mindset, but it's really people looking and employing really healthy coping mechanisms, because it is stressful. I mean, you and I you can see we're already pretty positive guys. Well, another reason why we connected so easily. But I think it'd be so easy to go down the negative path of the economy and the presidential thing and the Congress and drugs and guns and violence. I mean, you could go down and cover all those things and you'd have no reason to smile, much less be ever positive and things. So I think what I enjoy so much, when I started speaking about 10 years ago and became that gratitude guy, I just thought, what's neat about this is it appeals to everybody, young and old, heavy or thin, smart or not so smart, or whatever you want to call it, black, white, brown. I mean, it doesn't matter, because I've spoken all the way from junior high schools to senior centers, so where the average age was 15 up to 95. And everybody could use a dose of gratitude and an attitude of gratitude, as I call it. And so I think the thing that encourages me the most is that there's people that are looking for different ways to cope. And as I tell them, when you get a gratitude mindset, and I'll talk a little later about a gratitude journal, and you start writing just 5 minutes every day, everything you're grateful for, it plants it in your brain, and it just gives you this really, really strong Teflon or armor, if you will, to fight off, as I call it, the negative gamma rays of life. And they're hitting us all from all directions all the time. So I'm just excited that people have employed it as a way to really cope effectively.
You know what? One thing that really struck me when you started out down that train of thought, when you said positive coping mechanisms, because whenever I hear coping mechanisms, my brain shifts to all the unhealthy things we do to cope.
Mm-hmm.
But, I forget we need to cope. We have so much on our plates. We need to do that. And so it's okay to have coping mechanisms, but let's choose for those to be positive. And that's obviously, like you're talking about with gratitude, that is such a positive way to cope and get through and keep our mindset.
Well, and that's a great point. And I think I've said this before, and you've heard this before too, but life, if you really look at it, whether it's David or Andy or anybody that's listening, is really like a roller coaster. Not all days are good days. There's going to be the highs and lows, and our whole life, and depending on how long we've been on the planet, you're going to have more highs and more lows. But what's so interesting about it, gratitude can help you when you're low to get back where you were in your high. But when you're high, everything's great. As I always like to say, everybody returns your phone calls. Everybody gets back to you on emails, and it's all this perfect world. But when you're low, that's where you learn the lessons. And that's where you really get the best training about understanding how to cope. And so it's just knowing that's going to be up and down. It's not really realistic to think every day is going to be a great day. So if you have a great day, incredible. But if you don't, what do you do? And that's where the coping mechanism comes on the days that aren't so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's critical that you develop them when you're in the right mindset, because you need it in place or on the shelf so you can pull it down when those days are bad. You need to have already put your disaster plan in place. I like to think about when the power goes out and it's dark, if you're scrounging around looking for a flashlight and batteries and all the things aren't in the right places, that's really hard to do, versus if the lights go out and it's dark and you say, I know which drawer to go to. I might trip on a couple things or stub my toe on the way there, but the supplies are there.
That's a great analogy, and I really like that, because it is have it at the ready, as you say, in the drawer or on the shelf or what have you. The other thing that it's really occurred to me on this many days on the planet is that I just have really come to understand that people, one of the reasons that drugs and alcohol and all these negative things that kill people are so prevalent is because people are looking for a way to numb their pain. And a lot of people don't have a better way to do it. I mean, one of the classic examples is you should exercise every day. And I've had people say, I don't want to exercise. I'd rather go smoke a joint or something. And so I definitely get it. And my wife, unfortunately, passed away of a prescription pill overdose when she was 38. And my boys were 4 and 14. And one of the things that propelled me down this course of getting how to focus on what my blessings were. But I mean, she got hooked on them and she couldn't get off them. And she went into treatment 2 or 3 times and then eventually passed away, as I say, at 38. But I've looked at addiction and so many of the other sort of negative lifestyles in a much different light now, because some people just don't have the strength or the wherewithal or something to do the things that are healthy. And I don't have 5 minutes to write in a gratitude journal today or something like that. And I understand that. So I've become a lot more empathetic to people that don't have the mindset that frankly maybe a David or an Andy do, which is how to get to access that box on the shelf.
Right. And first of all, I just want to acknowledge that had to be so tough to go through. And I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, clearly you have, developed past that, but that could not have been easy.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, there's people who don't see the importance of having that in place. And I think, I know of times where it's like that idea of going for a walk, and do I have time to go for a walk? Well, do I have time for the treatment if I'm not keeping my body healthy? It's like, if I'm not, this 5 minutes now could, is time that's going to be forced on me later. Or, can you afford to go to the doctor? Well, can you afford not to? If you're not going to have a choice once you have the element that you could have avoided. Not that everything is completely avoidable, but.
Well, and I think too, like anything, one of my words I love is discipline. And what is it that gives Andy discipline, or what is it about David that I walk 8 miles every single day? It's just part of my deal. It's about 50 to 60 miles a week. And I just always carve out 2 hours, listen to podcasts that we're on, listen to Audible books and things. And people that know me, I say I listen on at 2.5 speed, and they go, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I like it that fast. I can understand it." But we know how important exercise is, and I tell people there's these elements, daily exercise, get your sleep, drink your water, write in a gratitude journal, do your stretching, do some meditation, hang out with positive people, listen to positive podcasts and things. But I just, again, at this age and looking back, and I'm in my career, I managed a lot of people, and I just, to be quite honest, was disappointed by how many people just didn't have the motivation. And it was just easier to go get drunk or go get stoned or do whatever versus do some of these other things. And I used to be kind of mad about it. And now I'm just empathetic. And I think that must be challenging.
Well, I think there's some compassion that you definitely have in that, it's too bad they're not in that place, or, we can't, there's an element of, one, you can't save everybody. I know I have people in my life who, they see you doing positive things, and people will say things like, "Oh, that's so great. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be that person." And it's like, I don't know how to tell you what to do other than these are the things that I do and this is what works for me. But if you can choose to change certain habits, you can change your life, but you have to want it bad enough. And for me, it's come from being in a really tough place where I had no choice. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, my life is either going to be miserable and like this, or I'm going to put some things in place and be able to actually make today a little better than yesterday. It's not going to be tremendously different overnight, but very quickly life got a lot better as soon as I started being grateful and being aware of what I had control
Well,
of.
and that comes back to something that I think is really critical is, and I've even said this about, when I think the most important skill when you're raising children. I have my two sons that were 4 and 14 when Dana passed away. They're now 38 and 30 and 28. My 38-year-old just turned 39. My 28-year-old is going to turn 29 in 2 or 3 weeks. And I call them my Rockstar Sons. They're just my most phenomenal sons. But I think managing people and raising children both require the same skill. The number one skill, there's many skills necessary, but the number one skill I contend is setting a good example. So again, whether it's Andy or David, we see these people, they're not doing it. What's the best thing you can do? Set the absolute best example you can, and hopefully they will follow it. And I know you've heard the old thing about do as I do, not as I say. And as I manage people both at Nordstrom, in those big stores, and Lowe's, a lot of employees, I got to see a lot of different personality types. But the best technique of all is they'd watch how hard I worked. And I got it. I came in early, stayed late, picked up all the boxes, picked up the trash, even though I'm the big store manager, did everything. And it worked really well because a lot of people will follow you when you're setting a good example. So I see that as you doing the same thing.
Yeah, I learned that. I was in management and retail as well, and the one rule that I learned was, don't do anything that don't ask your employees to do anything that they don't see you do.
Exactly.
If they
Exactly.
see me scrubbing the floor, cleaning the bathrooms when they need to be done, they're not going to be bothered when I say, "Hey, can someone clean the bathroom? Can someone do this? This is what we need to get done," because they know you're not above it. And
That's such a great example. And I think also I think I can really literally, like yesterday, remember the conversation with this guy. This just shows you how backwards people can be. And he's managing one of the departments at Nordstrom, and he says, I told him to do all this stuff, and I went to the espresso bar and had coffee.
Oh,
And I said, do you understand why that's not working really well? But he goes,
yeah,
I'm the manager. I can do what
right.
I want. I
Yeah,
said, I guess. How's that working for you? Yeah,
right.
so you're
Yeah,
not going to get much
you can
respect.
choose to do whatever you want, but you're not going to get results.
Exactly.
That's,
Exactly. So
that's
it's
awesome.
funny. Funny.
Well, David, we got to put you on the spot now and ask you, what's your awkward thing you've had to own in order to get to this place that you're at?
Oh gosh, great question. I was very fortunate that the speaking thing never bothered me. A lot of people say that their number one fear, you heard the different things say, is you're afraid of people, and they don't want to speak in public. In fact, they say people would rather run down a mall naked. I heard that once than speak in public.
Oh,
And
wow.
and then somebody said that somebody actually put death as number two, speaking in public. And so they were actually more afraid of public speaking than dying. And so I would say my awkward moment is probably when I said to my son, and so this was December 26, 2013, and I was managing the Lowe's, and this all led to this awkward, sort of feeling I ended up having, is I quit and I came home, and it was about 2 p.m, and Connor was 17 at the time, and he says, "What are you doing home?" And I said, "I quit." And he goes, "What do you mean you quit?" And I said, "I quit." He goes, you quit being a store manager at Lowe's?" I said, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Well, what are you going to be now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be a speaker." And he looks up from the couch and he goes, "Well, that's just super, Dad." And so I was taken a little aback, and he goes, "I have a question for you now. What are we going to do for food?" I said, "Well, that'll kind of work out." So the awkwardness, Andy, came out of the fact that being a speaker yourself, this, is that I didn't realize, nice plan, Dave, but speaking, at least in the beginning, is not a full-time job. You're not working
Right.
8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Talk about an awkward moment. I went, wait a second, let's see. Maybe I should have done the speaking on the side and kept the job at Lowe's and kept working. So, and now it's been about 9 or 10 years. So it's worked out, but awkward would be a good way to put it. Hmm.
Yeah, I love that, and I am laughing, and I'm trying to not laugh to the point of interrupting you. So people who are listening, you might not have picked up on how funny this is to me because of the same scenario that's so relatable for me, because I have been on a similar journey where it's like, this is my thing now. It's like, wait, where's the income? Where's the gigs? Where's the, when you get started, it's not like you just flip the light on and customers walk in the door.
Well, and it's funny too, because you and I had talked about that. I now remember that. And so as a result of not a full-time job, hence the awkward moment for me, I had to drive Uber. I drove Lyft. I worked at Postmates delivering food. I went to the Seahawks pro shop and sold jerseys. And I still remember one time on Uber, the lady goes, can you get my bags, put them in the trunk? And I go, sure. She goes, don't forget this bag over here. And I went, okay. She goes, can you get the door for me? And I went, look, you don't understand. I'm a very famous speaker. I'm called the gratitude guy. And I just kind of smile. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let me just get those in the back. And I got the car inside. Humbling.
Right. Like, you don't know who your Uber driver is right
now. Exactly.
If only you knew. It's like the reverse of when celebrities prank people. It's like the soon-to-be celebrity is your Uber driver.
Right.
I love that. So I'm really curious though. What was it that really made you feel like you had to cold turkey quit the day job and give up the income stream and jump into speaking?
Yeah, that's a great question, because looking back on it with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, as we know, I think it just came down to, I've actually had a very close friend, and he was the one that told me to get a gratitude journal. So he always says, did you mention my name in your talk yesterday? And I go, sometimes I do. But he was the one that now later in the career here has said, David, you would never be as far along as if you hadn't quit everything together and put all the chips, even though I had to drive Uber and sell the Seahawks jerseys and all those things. And he is right. That's really true. But it would have been a little bit less stressful, because we have something, called money, and we need to pay for our rent or our mortgage and our food and our expenses and so forth. And so that really was true. By going in all in, I really developed something. And I don't know if you and I talked about this, but one of the things that came out of that is all these different things. I did a gratitude journal, that Gratitude Guy's Daily Gratitude Journal. I've done 5 other books on gratitude. I do online courses. I do a couple of, I did my podcast, as you and I talked about too. There's been different things I've developed that I have merchandise that says that Gratitude Guy right here and all that kind of thing. So I developed about 5 or 6 other income streams. And maybe I wouldn't have done that if I had, taken it slow, because it was kind of forced to think, how can I make money other directions besides speaking and doing courses and workshops. I've got a couple of workshops coming up for Boeing. I just did a talk for Microsoft, and those are more workshops more than keynotes or big speeches and things. And those can be lucrative. So it really forced me to look at other ways to make money, because let's face it, we do have to make money, and it's part of the deal. And then it takes the stress off you when you're going out and living your dream, so to speak.
Yeah, I can see the value in that. And I really, it's that, that chicken and the egg thing of, okay, do I use the income to help spur my business along and keep the day job, or do I cut that off cold turkey? And then I have this asset that we overlook a lot of times as a big asset of our time. It's like, well, if I'm not in the day job, that gives me so much time to focus on my business and so much energy, where I'm not wondering if the new ads are up and the end caps are flipped and whatever you need to do to get the store ready and hire people for different departments for the season. Well,
and then another thing too, which I admit everybody went through this, but it was brutal for me, was the pandemic. Because I remember it was March of 2020. I was doing a talk in Cincinnati, and I was on the plane like everybody. The same thing has hit us about that March of 2020. And I came back and I'm on the plane. Why does everybody have a mask on? What's going on here? And then the pandemic hit and went full time. So, but I lost, gosh, I've forgotten now, 8 or 10 talks worth quite a bit of money that all canceled. Because nobody's in person, and they all said, we'll get back to you. Well, guess what? One got back to me, and I lost like 8 of the 9 or 9 of the 10. And that was brutal, because I was starting to get some pretty good fees. But again, who didn't go through a tough time in the pandemic? So everybody went through that. But that was right in the 4 or 5 year mark for me, where I was just getting momentum and finally starting to charge some decent fees. But as you know, and anybody that's a speaker knows, how you get those fees up to a decent level is just time in the saddle and
Yeah.
just talk after talk. And I've said used to have it over there in Excel spreadsheet. I think I've done 850 talks. I'd say 700 of them were free.
Wow.
So it's just, you
Yeah.
just have to do. And it was Rotary and Chambers and Lions and Kiwanis. I did a prison one, schools, hospitals, so, but that's what you have to do to get
Mhm.
started, get your name out there and hone your craft, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone was telling me that, I think was it Zig Ziglar, who spent 20 years talking to churches, before he
Yeah.
got out there and just really putting in the time. And I'm like, I'm not stuck on myself enough to think that I can beat that. But at the same time, like, I don't know if I have the patience for 20 years. These
Well,
thoughts
it's
come
true,
quick.
and
But
this has been attributed to different people. The last one I heard was Bob Seger from the Silver Bullet Band, but he said I
okay.
spent 25 years to become an overnight success.
Right. Yeah.
So it does take time and things, and there's little things along the way, and I'm sure you've had this happen to you, Andy. But when before the pandemic and going down to this club I was part of down called Columbia Tower Club and stuff, and in Starbucks, and I'd be in Starbucks and people go, "You're that gratitude guy. I've seen you speak before." And of course,
Yeah.
if I was with my friends, they just they just roll their eyes and just go,
Oh, no.
"Well, I'm
Yeah.
just like a little mini celebrity, just getting known." But it does. I don't know if there's any other substitute for it, like any cliff notes. It just takes time.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious, back to that conversation with your son. Like, you share this with them. Hey, I'm changing our worlds, because as a father, choices that you make affect, your kids,
Sure.
especially when they're still at home. And, you can't just say, well, I've made this change in my life, and, go get a job to feed yourself. Uh,
Right.
so how did that go the next year? Like, was it, oh, I'm on board, Dad, let me help you put up flyers?
Well,
Was it good luck?
yeah, that's a great question. I don't think anybody's asked me that before. And that's a great question because I am extremely close to him and I watched him being born. My older son I adopted when he was 10 and I met him when he was 2. And then Dana, as I mentioned, passed away. But having watched Connor being born and nurturing him, and then from the age of 4.5 when she passed away, raising him, he and I have always been, I'm very close to my older son, Kyle, but my younger son, Connor, again, I watched him being born. So he was always, I have to say, extremely supportive. And it was really neat, even though we had that kind of flippant answer back then, because I was making good money. And you know that because you and I talked about retail experience and
Yeah.
you don't mind some of the pressure and the visits and the walks and things.
Right.
You can make pretty good money. But I think the best thing is because we communicated so well, he knew what it meant to me. And I told him, and the backstory is on it that I didn't mention, but this is why it's so powerful for me is that I was 19 years old and I was a freshman at the University of Washington. I graduated from Queen Anne High School in Seattle. And this teacher asked me to come out and do a talk for his students at Ingram High School in 1969. And so I went out and I did the talk, and it was about how to be successful as a business class or something. And it was half hour. And I'm 19 years old, as I mentioned. And I went and sat in my car and I thought, that's what I want to be someday as a motivational speaker.
I
And that
love
was
it.
in 1969, and they didn't start until 2013. So I think it's like 43 years or something.
Mhm.
But it always had been in the back of my mind. And I thought, like a lot of us, and I feel bad for people because I coach people. And that's another thing I thought I forgot to mention about income is I coach a lot of people. So having
Yeah.
coaching clients can make good money too, which it was, again, I hadn't thought of that in the beginning. But what was interesting to me is I've met a ton of people that never lived their dream. And I think it's so sad. Well, I always wanted to be this. When I grew up, I wanted to be this. I just, and then family, things got in the way. I got married. I had kids. I did this. And I think it's so sad. So I remember thinking, I don't want to be one of those people. And so I think not only was Connor supportive and Kyle too, but I think he also saw, gosh, my dad's setting a good example, as we said earlier, about he's living his dream. And
Mhm.
yes, it's going to be tough, but it's there's something about, I've said, and I know you experienced this too, that number one, at least once or twice a week, I get some note, card, letter, comment on my videos or something that says you changed my life.
Yeah.
And just nothing at Nordstrom, nothing at Lowe's, nothing any of those other jobs I had can come close to that. And I think when I walk off a stage, and I'd say half the time I get a standing ovation, and I have them doing all these exercises and they're very interactive and involved. And I walk back to my book table and I go, I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world because you're
Mhm.
impacting these people. So I think, coming way back to your question, I think Connor really understood how important that was to me. And yes, it was going to be a tough challenge, but at the same time, now looking back on it, obviously I'm so glad I did it. But there were some times, Andy, I must be totally candid, I'd look in the mirror and go, do you have any idea of what you're doing?
Right.
And
Yeah.
but you got to battle through that.
Well, I guess, and that's a question because I know the moments I've had, and as I'm thinking of that, I'm wondering, were there times where you were just ready to say, I should go back into the world I was in before and get the big check and not be responsible for
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing about it. One of my favorite things I tell both my sons, and I'm very blessed to have these two rock star sons, as I mentioned. I said, I'm never going to tell you what to do, but I'm always going to tell you, here's the plus and minuses on your left decision, and here's your pluses and minuses on your right decision.
Mhm.
And then you make the decision. So I think, like anything else, there would be days where I think, oh, that big check every other Friday, 401k, vacation,
Right. The
PTO
security.
days, gosh, all those things. And oh, but you had to go out on your own and you had to be your own person and stuff. But it's so I don't think anybody, in fact, I thought this was really interesting. It was a podcast because I love podcasts, and you and I talked about that when we met. One of the ones I was on recently, and they'd surveyed or had talked to a whole bunch of CEOs, very successful CEOs. And the number one common thread through all of them was that they never gave up and that they blasted past the self-doubt.
Mm.
Self-doubt is like that little devil on your shoulder going, you need to bag it. This is not working. The angel's over here saying, no, it's going to pay off. This is going to be fun. You're going to impact lives. But that devil can sometimes win. And we better go back to the safety and security. And it's too bad because I'll tell you something that just pops into my mind. This is why I think it's so sad in many ways, is I had a friend that worked at Boeing for years. This always left such an impression on me. And this was literally true. This is no exaggeration. They would have somebody that would retire and they would take the little retirement notice, Fred Smith, left wing assembly, and they put it on the bulletin board. And in the drawer, they pin it up there. They'd have a yarn and they'd yarn about 2 or 3 feet over. And then 3 months later would be the obituary
Oh gosh.
because they'd lost their purpose.
Wow.
No friends. They used to have all those friends making those left wing assemblies. I said, no. You mean 3 months, or you mean 3 years? She says, no. 3 months. Happened all the time. So I think one of my modules that I talk about is find yourself, find your talent, find your passion, find your purpose. And my whole concept is, I contend for David Brooke or Andy Vargo, it's the most important relationship is one you have with yourself, and you can have your spiritual relationship too, but that's so important. Then figure out what your talent is. And for me, I tell people, if the person's 5'1" and 150 pounds, they're probably not going to be a quarterback, but maybe they can be a jockey at the racetrack or something like that. So
Right.
make your talent something you can relate to. And the thing I always say is make your strengths productive, make your weaknesses irrelevant. And I can go down and speak to 10,000 soldiers at Joint Base Lewis McChord, but I can't draw a circle to save my life. And
Right.
so I'm not going to go take an art class. It doesn't make
Right.
sense. And the third thing is find what you're passionate about. And that's that thing, like me, what did you want to be when you grew up? I was 19. And what did you never get a chance to do because it wasn't good money or wasn't any of those things you always dreamed of? And so if you get a connection with yourself, figure out your talent, figure out your passion, you'll probably find your purpose. And gosh, I think people are hardwired to find their purpose. And I read something recently that people that have a purpose live 7 to 15 years longer than people that don't have a purpose. So
Wow.
I think there's
I believe it.
yeah. So it's some things like that around that are really cool.
Yeah, and I think that, it's really sad to me when I see people who can't identify a purpose, and I was in that space for a long time. Like there were parts of my life that I had purpose. Like I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good role model to my kids. But as far as like for myself, what is that I want to do? And I knew that I wanted to be an author and a speaker as a kid, but I didn't see that as a career choice. And I didn't see that as an option. It wasn't on the list at career day. I'm like, these are the things you can be. So it just was out of my head. And every time I saw a speaker, it was always there was some horrific story tied to their life. And I want to live that life. I don't want to go through that to do this. True. And who's going to listen to my story? So, now that I have found something that I'm excited about and passionate about, it changes everything. And when I think about people that it's like, oh gosh, I'm sorry you can't find that purpose. That's how I feel about myself in the past. I look back and it's like, God, that guy was wandering around lost in the desert. Like someone needed to just shake him and go, there's a point. But that time in the desert was kind of what I needed in order to have the story that I can now tell.
Exactly. And it's interesting too, and we've compared notes on this a little bit. back at the book table, 90% of the comments have to do with the stories I tell. I love the story about Connor and baseball. I love the one you had about the $20 bill. I loved how you, and it's not the other concepts, it's the stories. But as a result of me waiting until 2013, I was 63 when I quit Lowe's and started. And gosh, I think my heroes were Colonel Sanders. He started KFC at 63. J.C. Penney, Mary Kay Ash, drawn a couple, there's two or three others that were in the late 50s, early to late 50s that started it. John Houseman was an actor who won an Academy Award at 71 and started acting at like 65. So those are people that really inspire me that it's never, ever too late to live your dream. And that's what people ask me about that. They say, oh, you're such an inspiration. And I said, well, don't forget, it does take some guts. And that's what you mentioned a little earlier, is to step away from that check and all those bennies, as you mentioned. It's tough, but it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, and I love that you point that out. I use the Colonel Sanders example all the time of here's someone who, you know, what is he, 67, 68 when he started his restaurant. 5 years later, he sells it for, he's a millionaire.
Exactly.
Because he realized he needed to repurpose. And it was because life changed around him. They put in highways and took out, you know, his customer base. And so we can hem and haw all we want about, you know, our life changing, our, you know, people leaving us, our income stream going away, whatever it is. But yeah, you might be right about whether or not it was an injustice or something happening out of your control. But the only thing you can control is what you're doing to move forward.
Right. And then the other side of it, too, is the other end of purpose. And that is people like Joe Paterno, who got in trouble at Penn State, dies 6 months later. Andy Rooney did his last talk on 60 Minutes, and he was getting up there a little bit aged. And like 3 or 4 months later, he was dead. Bear Bryant had like 4 or 5 championships at Alabama. He finally retires. He wasn't all that old. A year later, he was dead. And so what was taken away from all this is their purpose. And I think it's interesting because at my age now, and I plan to work late into my 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, because I enjoy it so much.
Right.
I have a lot of friends that it's golfing and it's going to Starbucks and things, and that's fine. But I think it can be problematic. And I think when you have that, when you take away that purpose, boy, that's a tough thing. Because when you think about every day, today I got up, had my list, and I'm going to be talking to Andy on the podcast. I'm going to do this. I have a whole full schedule. And that having that purpose, I think, really helps keep this brain engaged. And I know at my age, I've really learned, I mean, taking care of this, I mentioned I walk all these miles every day, this body, but this one is almost more important to take care of. And how do you keep those neurons and everything firing in your brain too?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's all about learning new stuff and keeping something in front of you. But like you said, you have to have that purpose, and that purpose doesn't necessarily have to be your career. Maybe it's your involvement in your church or your organization or your family, but whatever it is, you have to be passionate about it, and that has to give you a drive so that you wake up and you think, this is what I'm doing today. I'm spending time with loved ones. I'm feeding homeless people, whatever that thing is that your drive is.
Yeah, so true. So true. Man, that's good.
So, so you, like you said, you have developed a lot of stuff. You had not just that downtime of, oh, I'm not just going to Uber, but I've got to create the books. I've got to get all the stuff out there. I love that because, you know, I feel like when you have a business like what we have, it's not unlike going to the grocery store where it's okay, well, I've got all the different aisles I can shop down. Here's my commodities. Here's my high ticket items. Here's the things that are impulse items at the checkout, and maybe that's the book. How did you decide kind of what's most important? Was that something you just decided, here's my smorgasbord of items and I'm going to create all this stuff, or were there needs that came up along the way?
Well, that's another good question. And I think that what's interesting is I'd love to sit and say I had some grand plan and I had a business plan all laid out, but maybe like other people too, it really wasn't that way. A lot of it was just born out of like the talks. And then I remember when I did this, I held this up earlier, this gratitude journal. This is the 4th iteration of it now. I've changed it and made it better. It has a template in it, and it shows you where to write and what you write and what you're grateful for and the highlight of your day and these different things. And so that kind of became a natural. And I thought, oh, wait a second. So then I'll do a gratitude journal. So that'll be an extra product to sell. And then a lot of companies will buy one for all the attendees, which is really nice. And then they did the different books. But for instance, I forgot to mention it earlier as part of the online courses and the merchandise and things like that. And that was the coaching. And where that came from is at the book table, people saying, I'd like to talk to you. Do you think you could help me? And this whole idea. So that's how I got into coaching. It wasn't part of the plan. And I call it like a gratitude coaching clarifying consultation call, so that I can help people infuse their life with gratitude and clarify some of the things that they need to be doing, that they're trying to overcome pain points and so forth. And that's really enjoyable. So I've done the individual coaching and the group coaching. But again, that kind of came out of the talks. And what I think is interesting, and this is where the pandemic, of course, was challenging as it was for all of us, but really the actual in-person talks, I get the people that want to be coached, they buy the books, they want to talk about online courses, they want to have me come and talk to their company, their place if they want to know, or they want to get together and talk about other possibilities. Do you think you could help me become a speaker, whatever it might be? So that's why, like all of us, where the pandemic has kind of subsided, I'm just so happy to be back in person again. But a lot of those just came out of just opportunities more than some big grand plan.
Right. I love that you walk us through that process, because people who find you now, or they see you and they go, oh, look at all this stuff David has. He's that gratitude guy, and here's his whole package. And they picture someone at the beginning just writing out that business plan and saying, well, I've got to check all these boxes, I got to have all these things. But the reality is it develops over time, and pretty soon you wake up and you're like, I have this offering and this brand and this company that is a force by itself.
And that's such a good point, because you also just have to be open to the opportunity. And another one, I can't believe I didn't mention it because I'm now monetized, but it took me literally 16 years, is YouTube. And I did my first video, and like even before this 2006, I hadn't even been speaking, but I just did a video on something. And I only got monetized about a year ago, but now I have almost 2,000 videos on YouTube. So it's a big difference maker, if you will. And I typically do a gratitude walk every day, and I do a Monday morning minute, and then sometimes I do videos throughout the week. So, but that was another one that I didn't realize it at some point I could monetize it, but I just kept thinking I want to do videos, and then realize, oh, I could make money doing this too. So that's another one that has been very helpful in terms of the income part of the model.
Yeah, I love that. And the fact that you call out that it's a 16-year process. It might not be for everybody. It might be 5, it might be 10, it might be 20, but we create this content and we put it out there. And I have tended to have moments where I don't make something for a week or 2 months, depending on, how I'm doing and what I get distracted by. And I used to think, oh, I stopped doing that. Now it's over. I'm not a YouTube guy anymore. I'm not this, but I forget that all of the content is still there. So, you create 1,000 videos and you walk away from it for a little bit. Well, you come back and you make another one. Now you have 1,001 and 1,002, and that base is still always there.
And it's so important too. I've always loved the analogy of falling off the horse. Is the most important thing is to get back on. So if you haven't done videos for a while, no time like today, start doing them again as an example. And it just shocks me, because I remember I actually framed it. It's over here somewhere, where when it said you are now a YouTube partner. And after so many videos, and I now have, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers, something like that. But I remember when there was just 1 or 2 and it started out. But you but you watch enough YouTube videos, you can do how to fix a screwdriver on a screw head or something. I mean, everything you want is on YouTube. So you write in there how to become a good YouTube thing. The number one thing they say is consistency.
Yeah.
So you're doing it over time, and that's the thing. So they see Andy all the time, they see David, they see whatever. And so that I've been pretty good at, but it's because there's days, I don't really feel like doing a video,
Right.
And then I get this other, speaking of YouTube, this is just part of you have some audiences that love you, some don't love you, some clap, and some give me a standing ovation, some just give polite golf applause,
Right.
But I have, like, on a typical daily gratitude walk, I'll get 300 or 400 views. And then tomorrow I'll do the daily gratitude walk, and it'll be like 30 views.
Right.
So, whatever.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah. And we make the mistake of judging our success or our movement forward based on the last thing that we had, right?
I know.
Oh, well, now I'm at 300 views, so they should all be 300. Then you get 10. You're like, what happened? Was I canceled? What just happened to me?
Well, and it's true. And that's actually a good, I'd call that metaphor, but a good example for Part of YouTube is the content. Part of it is a very important part is the thumbnail. That's like the movie poster, and then the actual title, and then the description that you put in there, and then of course the content, and then the 3 to 4 minute video is kind of the sweet spot. I do shorts every day on the gratitude walk, and that's 59 seconds or less, and that's the short little deal. But there's something like if I send you a video and you see, the first thing you're going to do, like me, is look in the right hand corner, say you got to watch this video, and it says 39:14. I don't have 40 minutes. I'm really busy.
Right.
But if it says 6:03 or something, you'll watch it. So the time, but all those things are different things. And just when I think I've got it right, I'll do another video and there's 11 views. I go, whatever, I give up.
Yeah. Well, before we get too far away, coming back to that coping with awkward and owning it.
Yes.
I'm really curious how that felt like when you had that conversation with your son and you said he was really supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like was there an element of not letting him down or of not wanting to be a failure because of the people around you, or was this is something I have to do no matter what?
Yeah, I think honestly, it was probably a combination of both. I remember I've always been a very decisive person. So once you make a decision, don't be indecisive. Nobody likes an indecisive person. And I've always been very decisive. And I remember I had a teacher that was business communication in college. And it was just this shocking, sad thing. But I always remember this. On Friday, he said, or Thursday, he said, I'm going in for surgery tomorrow. I'll be recouping over 2 or 3 days and I'll be back on Monday. And William, Harper, I want to say his name was, that would have been 1972 or something like that. Anyway, and then Monday we go to class and somebody walks in and said, sorry, he died on surgery. And I just went, wow. But I just remember, the reason I bring it up is because this stuck with me since 1972. He says, be a decisive person, make a decision. If it's a good decision, fantastic. If it's a bad decision, make another decision. So to correct it. And It seems so simple, but it was so good. But don't be indecisive. So I think reason for bringing that up is that I remember thinking I had many times of self-doubt. I wonder if this is going to work. But I've described it as something about having this little candle burning in the back of my brain somewhere that's flickered but never gone out, saying this is going to work. And that delivering this message, and especially once I get into gratitude and knowing how much you can help people by showing them there's this wonderful mindset called the gratitude mindset, and then these positive comments I get that literally get me choked up, and you changed my life and all that, throughout the week. And I think, how did I get so lucky? So I think knowing that was always there, it kept me going through, even when self-doubt raises its ugly head and you ask yourself if you know what you're doing. So I think, but that comment about just make another decision to correct your earlier decision is so important. And William Peck was his name. And I always remember that. And that was 1972. But it's just funny how professors and mentors and things can impact you.
Definitely. And I love that it gives you freedom to make a decision and not be chained to that always being like, do I have to make the right decision? It's not the only decision you're ever going to make in your life. And if it doesn't go the way you want, like you said, make another decision and move on. Yeah,
that was very, very helpful. Very.
Yeah. So before we go, I'm going to ask you how we can challenge people to own their awkward. But before we step into that, for all of our listeners and viewers, we have the links to your social media and website in the description. So please click on that and follow it. But what's the best way for people to support you?
Well, the best way is you can reach me at thatgratitudeguy.com. That's my website. And then for people that like to, the link will be in there, is I send out a Monday morning minute. And I'm trying to think if I put the link in there, but it's every Monday is a video. And if there's a place to sign up for it, I'm pretty sure there is. But if there isn't, you can reach me at david@thatgratitudeguy.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. I always offer consultations and clarifying calls for people that might be interested. So that's something that a lot of people take advantage of. A 30-minute call, sometimes 40 minutes, just to get an understanding of where you are and how gratitude can kind of help you. And then maybe the biggest thing of all, and I think the link was in there, is to get a gratitude journal. And yes, you can get a spiral notebook, but when you have something like this, it has the template. And I tell people there's a little saying in the front of the book that says, if you think about it, it's like a dream. If you talk about it, it inspires you. But if you write about it, it empowers you. And there's something about now tomorrow, it'll have the highlighted day. One of my highlights tomorrow will be, I'm so grateful to Andy Vargo for inviting me to his podcast. So you'll be in the book. So
Wow.
you know that. And it's just so cool. But that writing it plants it in your brain.
Yeah.
And I tell people as kind of one of my favorite takeaways, well, if you heard anything I said, let me leave you with this about what gratitude can do for you. Every day, if you can write in a gratitude journal, fantastic. If you can write a sentence, but even if you can just write one word for a week, what are you grateful for? Just one word. Try it for a week and see what that'll do. And then try a sentence and then a couple of sentences. And then this is literally 5 minutes. That's all it is every day. And it can change your mindset. So any of those things are so helpful. And it's, again, back to what we said at the beginning, it's such a great coping mechanism.
Yeah, I love that you call out actually writing it down, because we know the power of that, even just in note taking or making a list. Like I will think about things and I'll listen to a speaker, but if I am writing things to help me remember it, just writing it down, even if I never look at the notes again, even if I don't read them, it's cemented in my brain because I've tied that action to it. So flipping that and then applying it to gratitude and making sure that you write it down, I just is crucial. I'm so thankful for that.
You make such a great point, because I have my Andy Vargo notes right there with highlights on it on April 11th, 2:30. Own your awkward. And you're right. But see, I took down some really good notes of things you said, which were really helpful. But also to your point, which I'm going to remember that too, but it also, as you're writing it, plants it here better, in addition to have the reference for later. So really good point. Really good point.
Yeah. So you gave us that. Is there anything else you'd want to challenge people to be more grateful and own their awkward before we leave everybody today?
Well, I think the neat thing about when I first met you and own your own awkward is understand that you're not alone. I mean, I think we all think when Dana passed away, I'd heard of a support group, but I never had gone to one. And so, gosh, what a lifesaver. And I went 2 weeks after she passed away, and everybody feels, in this case, awkward. They feel alone. They feel like they're the only person in the world that's suffering. And you would watch these people, usually there's about 15 or 20 people, go around in a circle. And I can remember, David, would you like to go ahead? Yes, my name is David Brooke. My wife, Dana, died September 29th, 1998. We have 2 sons. Kyle is 14, Connor is 4. I'm devastated. I'm going to start crying right now. I don't even think I can talk about it. But then every week it got better. So whether it's owning your own awkward, whether it's dealing with something else, 99.9% of the time, somebody else has gone through the same thing. So you're not alone. And what I offer is, number one, to make sure that you just have support people around you that can help you to see that. And, make sure that they're the kind of people that would lift you up, like the rising tide, all boats. And then also try the gratitude journal. And even if it's just one word, you're always going to have something to focus on. And I've been in talks before, Andy, where people have said, I have a question on Zoom too. I just lost my best friend. What do I have to be grateful for? And I said, well, you're going to, heal from that. It takes time. Time's the great healer. But I said, but even so, I'm sorry he's passed away, but you do have breath that you have a warm bed tonight. You have a hot shower that you got to take today. You have food in the fridge. There's always going to be things, and you'll get through this too, but there's always something. And that's why it's just neat in the journal. And then plus you can go back and see what you've written. So I just highly recommend the gratitude journal. It's so important. And to remember, you're not alone. And I think that would really help when you're going through some of those awkward moments.
Yeah, that is beautiful. David, you have given us so many good highlights of inspiration and ways to not just cope, but to thrive today. I really am so thankful for knowing you, for having you in my life now, and for everything you've been willing to share today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. It's been my pleasure.
And everyone else, be sure that you check out the links, grab your gratitude guide, and start filling it in. Like David said, even one word will make a huge difference. And as always, own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.